Hello everybody and welcome back to yet another Oscar prediction video. This is a little bit different because at the time I'm doing this, happy holidays first of all, because I'm doing this on Christmas Eve is when I'm recording it. And it's later than I normally would. But also, I don't normally do Oscar prediction update videos in December because things are changing on a daily basis pretty much. And so you will notice there's certainly been a lot of changes since the November one. We've had Golden Globe nominations and Critics' Choice nominations and a shortlist. I specifically wanted to wait until after the shortlists because we're a month away, and this will give you that last little update between now and when nominations come out. And I think I'm going to actually try to do a final predictions video. I know I did like a reactions video last year where I shared what my final predictions had been. But yeah, I think it's really important that I air those out there because I am no longer on Twitter/X, not by my own choice. I was taken off of those, so I want this to be a reflection of what my final Oscar predictions of the year are. But yeah, that's next month. This month is right after the shortlists have come out. So the first half of this video is going to be talking about the categories to which there are shortlists. And some of these thoughts that I'm going to ramble off unscripted are kind of just instant reactions to the shortlist. Obviously, I've seen them, but they're pretty candid, and so I haven't had as much time to mull over these. When we get to the top categories, that's when I'm going to go in depth about everything that I've been feeling. So yeah, this is certainly going to be a longer prediction video, I think, than typically than the ones that I normally do. So there's a lot of rambling ahead, so let's get started quick. Let's talk about Best Documentary Feature first and foremost. Now, I have 20 Days in Mariupol in the lead. I think for the longest time I had Beyond Utopia. That was the movie that was supposed to be winning from everything I heard, but 20 Days in Mariupol, I don't know, okay, technically speaking, the movie that's done the best is still a Michael J. Fox story. But I have this inkling that it's not going to be nominated because it won the Critics' Choice Documentary Award. Isn't that always how it goes? I don't know. Because it's a populist celebrity doc, I feel they're probably not going to go for it. But who knows? 20 Days in Mariupol makes sense because of everything that's been said about it, because it is the important doc. It's the timely doc. It's the one very timely to what's going on right now in Ukraine. And I feel like we saw with last year what they went with Navalny, which was also very timely with everything going on. I think this will continue the trend. But American Symphony did surprisingly well in that it got on the short list for both song and score. So that one could be a threat. Now, Stamped from the Beginning, I think, is one to look out for. I think it's getting nominated. Having seen it, I don't know if it's necessarily winning. Also, by the way, one thing that I didn't clarify earlier is that I have been watching so many screeners in the past month. So at this point, I'm caught up with basically all of the main movies. I've seen Poor Things, I've seen American Fiction, I've seen Holdovers, May December, Maestro. All of the really important ones have been knocked off at this point. And so I have a much better understanding of what's contending. But I am kind of saving a lot of the documentaries and international features for later. Transitioning to Best International Feature, again, not a whole lot is crazy here. I think Zone of Interest, we're all just assuming that's going to be a top contender unless Society of the Snow suddenly catches on and is a big Best Picture contender, which for the record, I don't really think it will be. I know it got on at a lot of the shortlists, but I don't know, it feels like everyone's like, ooh, this is a Netflix international tech player that's going to come on strong at the very end, exactly like All Quiet on the Western Front, and I don't know, it just seems really weird that this movie would do exactly what All Quiet did last year. Like, when's the last time that one movie copies another movie's awards trajectory beat for beat the same? So I feel like Society of the Snow, It might get in a few places outside international feature, but I don't see it being a top contender. And I still think Zone of Interest is safe to win this. And for everything else, I don't really have a whole lot to say. The top 5 is still the same. For Best Animated Feature, so this is a little bit interesting. So the top 3 are the same. Nimona has moved one step up, and then I have Ninja Turtles. Now, when I saw Wish, and especially when I saw the reaction that everyone had to Wish, I was like, that's dead. That's no longer a contender at all. But then it surprisingly got in at Golden Globe and Critics' Choice, which makes me a little bit hesitant. Is Disney just going to really, really campaign this one hard, and it's still going to somehow get the nomination? I don't really think that's going to happen. The fact that the movie missed the shortlist for song makes me feel like Wish is probably dead in the water, but I am a little bit concerned about its chances. And The Peasants is also there as a potential, indie animated film that could get on, but then Suzume is also there, and that got the Globe nomination. I really don't know. At this point, Ninja Turtles makes the most sense as a 5th slot, and Nimona, I hope, should be safe. But I am a little bit concerned for that movie. I really, really wanted to get this nomination. Now, Best Sound is where things get really interesting, because now we have a solid 10 because of the shortlist. So the 10 movies that you see here are the 10 that were on the shortlist. And there are definitely some surprises, definitely some snubs. Poor Things not being here is a surprise. Barbie making the shortlist is a surprising show of strength for that movie. But, okay, in terms of what's actually going to get nominated, Oppenheimer, obviously. Maestro, having seen the film, is a really strong contender. But part of me is kind of hoping that Zone of Interest can actually pull off an upset win, because sound is so integral to that movie and what makes it work. Right now I'm just really hoping it can get the nomination. Killers of the Flower Moon is definitely on, and then there's a couple different choices for what that last slot should be. You could say Barbie, just so you have a solid Best Picture of 5 in there, but Napoleon showed up on quite a few of the shortlists. So I'm like, okay, that's probably going to get nominated somewhere. And right now I have it as a lone sound nominee. All the others, maybe. I think there is a little bit of a question. It does depend on what the sound branch likes, what does well at the bake-off. But for now, this is the 5 that I have. Now, Best Original Song is frustrating this year, because the Golden Globes and Critics' Choice are kind of the only 2 big precursors that we have, and there was a 5 for 6 overlap with them, which should make this category easy, but 3 of those 5 were the Barbie songs, What Was I Made For, I'm Just Ken, and Dance the Night. Now, based on Academy rulings, 3 songs from the same film can no longer be nominated. One has to go. And were it not for that rule, I would gladly be predicting all 3 songs to get in, but I can no longer predict that, and Dance the Night is probably the one that's going to get left out, but we don't know that for sure, and part of me wonders if I'm Just Ken could be vulnerable. But right now, it's safe to predict those 2. It's also safe to predict The Fire Inside, because Diane Warren. Just put her all the way up to number 2, even if no one cares about the movie. It's Diane Warren. And also the song sounds a little bit different than the normal ones that she does, so... And for everything else, I just don't know. I'm going to assume the musical song from Color Purple gets on, and I'm just going to cross my fingers and hope that Past Lives can get in too. I know that Road to Freedom is likely because it's nominated at both Globe and Critics' Choice, but that is like the world's most forgettable song, and I am not the only person who's expressing that opinion, so I really hope that doesn't get in. John Baptiste could very easily get on. I don't know. I'll have to wait to see how well that film does overall. And the Killers of the Flower Moon song is really interesting, because I had no idea that that was a song that was eligible. Obviously, I hear that at the very end of the movie, and it's just, I mean, It sounds like chanting. I don't know exactly what they're saying. Foreign language songs can struggle to get in, but this is a big Best Picture contender, and it's like, I don't know. I guess it's not impossible. It would be kind of like Pie's Lullaby getting on, where it's like, wait, there was a song in that? And it is a little bit curious that Am I Dreaming from Spider-Verse is the one song from an animated movie to make the shortlist. No Peaches, no Better Place, no This Wish, just Am I Dreaming from Spider-Verse. Which makes me wonder if that film might be stronger than we're thinking outside of animated feature. Again, maybe just wishful thinking on my part, but I want to believe that Spider-Verse is a bigger contender than it probably is going to be. At any rate, Best Original Score, no huge surprises with the shortlist other than the fact that Past Lives didn't make it on. I do think the top three is very likely, and then I have Zone of Interest on. I'm not super confident about it, but the music is certainly very memorable. The music doesn't really work outside of the context of the movie, though, which could hurt it, certainly. And then I feel like we're definitely going to get at least one animated film, possibly two. Now, for the record, outside of that brief point in time in the 90s when they divided the score category into drama score and comedy score, only once have we gotten two animated films nominated for Best Original Score together, and that was in 2009 with Up and Fantastic Mr. Fox. So there is precedent for that. So I don't know, but the thing is, I don't know entirely which combination of the three we're gonna get. Because Elemental would make sense. I don't love that score, but it's Thomas Newman, and Thomas Newman does have a tendency to get on sometimes, but he did miss at Globe and Critics' Choice, and so that does make me wonder. Now, Boy and the Heron, which got on it at the Globes, that is a serious contender for my favorite score of the year. That score is unbelievably beautiful, but Joe Hisaishi has really struggled to get nominations for major American film awards. It would be so deserving, but I don't know what's going to happen. So right now, what's safe is for me to predict Spider-Man and Zone of Interest. And then the others, I just don't know. Society of the Snow, maybe, but they have not gone for Giacchino since his win, bafflingly. What's really hurting, what's really just frustrating to think about, is there is a chance John Williams could just get a random nomination for being John Williams for Indiana Jones. I don't want it to happen, but we cannot write out that possibility. Best visual effects. So again, we have a solid top 10 here. And this category still remains very, very difficult to figure out. I just don't know about Poor Things. I've seen the movie. There's certainly a lot to be said about that film. And in terms of the visual effects, they're present, but they do play a largely supporting role in the film. However, we've seen movies like 1917 win in this category in the past, where the visual effects are not the most showy or the most prominent. And Poor Things really does feel like the only one of these movies that's definitely going to get a Best Picture nomination. So, I don't know. Because there was a point in time when I thought Guardians of the Galaxy could take it, but Marvel is in such a low point right now. I don't think that they're going to give this movie the first ever visual effects award for an MCU film. Godzilla, maybe. The thing is, that movie's not going to get on anywhere except visual effects, but neither is Guardians. Could we see one of that? It's kind of having the same narrative that the creator was trying to have, of this big, really cool looking effects that were a lot, where the budget was a lot smaller than you would probably assume. The difference is that this movie is actually a hit, and critics actually really like it. It's worth pointing out that no Godzilla movie has ever been nominated in this category in the past, but I don't think that will hinder it from getting a nomination here. And then I have Spider-Verse getting on, which would be a big deal, I admit, but look at the competition. Maybe Society of the Snow happens, maybe it happens for one of these other ones, but like, this is a really good opportunity to give it to Spider-Verse. But then again, there are always going to be people that are like, it's animated, it doesn't count. I mean, the fact that it made the top 10, I think, is really, really telling. and I want it to happen. Fingers crossed. Best makeup and hairstyling. Okay, so I feel like this happens a lot in the shortlist, particularly with the makeup shortlist. There's usually one movie that is not on your radar at all at being in the Oscar conversation, and then it makes the shortlist, and you're like, oh, wait a minute, is this getting nominated now? And that's kind of how I feel about Last Voyage of Demeter, because my initial reaction was, wait, really? That movie that came and went about Dracula on a boat? Well, apparently it's getting in here, and if you actually look at the makeup, it is very impressive, and it is very showy. So maybe it's gonna get on. I don't know. I feel better about it than I do about most of the 6 through 10 films. I know that Killers of the Flower Moon is a big Best Picture contender, but I don't know how many people were really thinking about that movie as a makeup contender. There's some stuff. Leo has bad teeth, and there's that whole section where Lily Gladstone is sick, but it's not very showy. And I just feel like it's a surprise that Barbie isn't here. I mean, I know they don't always go for the hairstyling movie, but I thought that would show up. I thought Guardians would show up. Beau is Afraid, never gonna happen, but I like that movie at least made a short list, so the Academy is willing to acknowledge it somewhat. Yeah, Maestro's obviously winning. The rest, I just don't know. For Best Costume Design, ooh, okay, so I have Poor Things winning, and I recognize that it's tricky. I'll get to this later in production design, but I feel like production design is so close between those two movies that whatever movie loses production design is going to end up winning costume design, that they're going to split because as sort of a consolation prize. Now, Color Purple, Killers of the Flower Moon, I don't really have a whole lot to go off of there. Maestro, I just don't know what's going in that 5th slot, and that would make the most sense as just a tag-along nomination for a Best Picture nominee. Wonka could happen, though. It did get a Critics' Choice nomination. I feel like there's just enough love for that movie. Oppenheimer, I doubt. It's mostly just men in suits. And then the rest, I just don't know. The Hunger Games nomination would be really cool if that somehow manifested, but I don't know if the Academy's cool enough to do that. And then Priscilla, this is one of those categories where I just don't know, and I don't have much commentary to add. Production design. So as I said earlier, this is an incredibly tight race. Both Barbie and Poor Things in any other year would not only win, but would go down in history as like an all-time winner. And so it's just a really cruel twist of fate that these two movies happen to be duking it out in the same year. And I want to mention, in the history of the Academy Awards, there have been 6 ties. And if there was ever an opportunity to have a 7th, I'm just saying they both would be incredibly deserving winners. As of right now, I have Barbie ahead, but it is so close, and the production design in Poor Things shows a lot more variety, so do not write that out. Outside of that, yeah, the top 5 is identical, with Asteroid City as a very possible number 6, and there's just not as much to say. For Best Cinematography, we still have Oppenheimer as number 1, but Maestro is also in the conversation. And you know what? How weird is it that in between Oppenheimer, Maestro, and Poor Things, we have 3 Best Picture contenders that use both black and white and color cinematography throughout the film. That you don't always see that. Or maybe you see one black and white movie, but I don't know. It's weird to have 3 movies that do the same basic thing with their cinematography. And, okay, the 5th slot in cinematography is tough, but for some reason, and this is one of those weird no gut, no glory feelings, I'm going to predict Saltburn to be a lone cinematography nominee. It's just, sometimes we get those, and that movie seems to have just enough respect from the critics where it would make sense for that love to manifest somewhere. And if that were, it's just going to be open about this, not a huge fan of that movie, but I think the cinematography would be a worthy craft element to highlight with a nomination. Best film editing. This is tricky. The only two nominees that I feel confident about are Oppenheimer and Killers of the Flower Moon. And I know some have raised objections to Killers of the Flower Moon getting nominated because of its length, but that has not stopped the editing branch before. So, outside of that, I really don't know. I think Holdovers makes sense because the editing is comedic but also noticeable. And Barbie, normally I would not have gone with it, but this is going to sound weird, but the fact that it showed up in sound and the fact that there's sometimes a correlation between those categories makes me think it's an overall stronger contender than I thought previously, and that it's going to show up there. But Poor Things I'm actually a little bit hesitant about, because I feel like there was a point in time when a lot of people were predicting Poor Things to get a ridiculous amount of nominations and for it to get on in every single below the line it was eligible for. And then it missed the sound shortlist, which is like, okay, maybe this movie is a little less loved than we think. I don't know, but looking at 6 through 10, they all could make reasonable plays for the nomination. I feel like I have the least amount of commentary to offer insight here because I just don't know what direction. The editing branch has shown in recent years that they seem to be a little bit random, or at least seemingly random in the films that they nominate, because these days it's so tricky to judge what makes for good editing. The best editing is the editing that looks invisible. So, adapted screenplay is, I don't want to keep saying the word interesting, I feel like a broken record, but it's true. I think it's a very difficult two-way horse race, personally, between American Fiction and Poor Things. I think the fact that these movies are both comedies and they both have a lot of quotable dialogue is certainly going to help. I'm going to give the slight edge to American Fiction, partially because it's about a writer and partially because it's not a genre film. It's weird. I think being a genre film helps in original screenplay when they're like, ooh, you thought of a bold original idea. But in adapted screenplay, they tend to like movies that are a little bit more quote unquote serious. And I think American Fiction is gonna, yeah, American Fiction makes sense, but it is close. And then Oppenheimer and Killers are there. And I decided to move up All of Us Strangers into the 5th place slot. I did have Zone of Interest, but I just feel, having seen that movie, that the dialogue is not a very big part of it. I mean, the way that they restructured, that they adapted the novel, I think is interesting. But I just don't know. And I do think Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret is a very real possibility. And then outside of that, there's not a ton of possibilities that really seem likely to me. So, I don't know. For original screenplay, okay, so I have Barbie, Holdovers, and Past Lives in the top 3 where they were, and then I have Anatomy of a Fall in May, December. I've decided to take out Maestro because I personally believe that Maestro's screenplay is the weakest aspect of that movie. And I think Anatomy of a Fall and May, December both have really interesting, compelling screenplays, and I would much rather see those two getting on. So it's a little bit of hope dicting, but I don't know. I just think, looking at the top 5, it's a very flashy lineup with very, very good screenplays all around. And so I'm just gonna, yeah, I personally am gonna predict this 5. And I actually don't know what, I mean, Air maybe, Saltburn possibly, but I don't think there's a ton of contenders outside of that. So I don't know. It's probably gonna be this top 6 is my guess. But the acting categories is when things get really complicated, and these are the categories that I've mulled over for a long period of time. And it's unfortunate because, yeah, I actually haven't done an update video since seeing The Holdovers. That was the first movie I saw after my November update. And when I saw The Holdovers, I was like, oh, Dominic Sessa is for sure getting nominated. He's practically a co-lead. It's a really big role. He has the Oscar scene. It's going to happen. But then, okay, look at this top 5. I think Charles Melton, he's getting in. He just is. And Ruffalo, I think, is getting on. I think that performance is very, very strong and very funny and so unlike everything that we've seen from him. De Niro is the one where people are like, maybe he could miss, but I feel like he won't because he is such a legend and they like nominating legends. So Dominic Sessa just unfortunately gets taken out. And Dafoe is possible. I feel like Dafoe is very possible just because of the legend thing, but he doesn't do as much in the movie that's really surprising the way Ruffalo does. And like Dafoe, you watch that performance and you're like, that's Willem Dafoe doing his thing. With Ruffalo, it's like, I haven't seen you do this before. That's really cool. Sterling K. Brown, yeah, maybe. Glenn Howerton is a critic's pick, I think. I just wanted to throw in Milo Mercado Grainer at the very end, just because that's a performance that should be getting serious buzz. I do think the win is actually going to be really competitive between Downey and Gosling, and I would not rule out Gosling for the win at this time, but I'm going to stick with Downey for now. Now, for supporting actress, okay, I have a lot to say about this. First of all, Color Purple is the one movie I haven't seen yet, and I'm going to see that very, very soon. But there is a question of, okay, can Daniel Brooks really win? Because it feels like there was so much hype for that performance specifically when the movie first came out, but now reviews are just a little bit tepid and people aren't entirely sure whether she can do it. I will say I don't know if I necessarily see Divine Joy Randolph winning, because she does have some very showy scenes and she's very good in the movie, but I do feel the movie kind of forgets about her in the last third, and that's really gonna hurt her chances. Danielle Brooks, I've said it before and I've said it again, she's playing the Oprah Winfrey role. Oprah is a producer. Oprah will be campaigning on her behalf. So for that reason, I'm more inclined to believe that Danielle Brooks will win. But after that point, it gets tricky. Emily Blunt is sort of a default number 3, even though she wasn't doing so great in a lot of the early critics awards. So keep an eye out for her to possibly miss. Ferrera, I do think feels safe. I feel pretty good that Ferrera is going to get on. And then that last slot, I have Rachel McAdams. I do. I have Rachel McAdams. And this is a feeling that I had about her after seeing the movie, and then I saw so many critics awards were gunning for her. Like, she was getting mentions left and right from the critics groups. And I was like, okay, this is really going to happen. And then, bafflingly, she did not get nominated for a Critics' Choice Award or a Golden Globe, which you had one job, Critics' Choice Awards. Please stop trying to predict the Oscars and just go with the performance you like the best. She's literally the critics' choice. So, yeah, I really feel like McAdams has the love to get on. She's been nominated before. She's incredible in the movie. The movie is very accessible. What part of this is not clicking? I really, really want it to happen. And then you look at some of the contenders that are just below the top 5 that I think could happen. Both Jodie Foster and Julianne Moore got on at Critics' Choice and Golden Globe. And they're both legends. However, I am a little bit concerned. Foster, it just feels like no one really cares about that movie. And it just feels like the movie's sort of fallen by the wayside. It didn't even get shortlisted for makeup. And then Julianne Moore, possibly. She is very striking in the movie. I just worry if people aren't sure what to think about the movie, then they're not going to vote for her because that's a very unlikable character. And sometimes that can be a factor when it comes to getting singled out for nominations. I just don't know. This top 5 feels right for the moment. I just want to really bang the drum for Rachel McAdams because so many people are banging the drum for this performance. She needs to get in at SAG. I need to see her get in at SAG to know. Yeah, I have one more prediction video between this and the Oscars where those my final predictions, and you'll know by then if I'm predicting her by then. But that'll largely depend on whether or not she can get SAG. I'm really rooting for you, Rachel McAdams. She really deserves it. Best Actor. Oh boy, I talked about this last time. It's a very, very, very strong top 6, and I have now seen all of the top 6 performances, and I do believe they're all amazing. Any combination of the 6 would make for a very strong lineup. But yeah, I do think I have to get rid of DiCaprio. And the weird thing is, I had that thought early on, and I talked about in the last video about I think DiCaprio might be the vulnerable one here. And I was sort of thinking I was going to be all alone on this island, and then other people started agreeing with me. And I started seeing more and more people put DiCaprio at number 6. Because that character is just not likable. And the whole movie, you're like, please cut away from DiCaprio and cut back to Lily Gladstone. And I do want to point out the fact that in real life, Ernest Burkhart was in his 20s when all this stuff was going down makes the character make a lot more sense to me in terms of him being so naive and so easily manipulated. And I feel like having DiCaprio cast in this role actively hurts the movie. And so, yeah, he's DiCaprio. He gives a good performance, but I don't think he works in the film, and I think he hurts the movie. So I would be all for leaving him out of the top 5. It's not like he needs this at this point in the career. The way Jeffrey Wright and Coleman Domingo, their careers would be significantly boosted by an Oscar nomination, but you can't say the same for DiCaprio. So, yeah. Also, having seen Maestro, I get that there's discourse about that performance, but I just feel like it's so baity. It's just gonna happen. It's transformative, it's big, it's a showcase, and Cillian Murphy is there, but I don't know if that performance, because this will be his first nomination, and I feel Cooper is just considered so overdue, and it's very by the numbers, but look at what happened with Gary Oldman. It's just, sometimes the obvious trick works. Well done, Bradley Cooper, you did everything that an actor is supposed to do to win an Oscar. Here's your reward. Best Actress is probably the category that I'm the most invested in this year because it's turning into a real race. When I saw Killers of the Flower Moon, I was insistent that this could be Lily Gladstone, that she has the narrative. And a lot of people, I think, started to go for her when the Critics Awards happened. Gladstone has won a lot of the early Critics Awards, and the fact that she won the Gotham for an entirely separate movie does imply that she has a lot of love this season. And Scorsese and DiCaprio have basically made her the face of the movie, which I feel was a smart decision. And so I was all gung-ho for Gladstone winning, and then I saw Poor Things. And, it's tough. It's really, really tough. Because on the one hand, Gladstone is doing a lot with a little. On the other hand, Emma Stone is doing a lot with a lot. It's just so incredibly showy. This is exactly the type of performance actors love and are impressed by. She's basically doing Flowers for Algernon in the sense that the character starts out very mentally slow and then very gradually gets a little bit smarter in every scene. And the fact that this movie was shot out of sequence just is like, it's really, really technically impressive from an acting standpoint, and she really is the heart and soul of the movie, but then so is Gladstone, but also Stone is much more present in her film. It's gonna be really, really close. And for the longest time, my argument was that Gladstone, much like last year, Emma Stone was going to be like Cate Blanchett of like, oh, I don't really need to win another one. She was going to be very humble on the campaign trail. She was going to recognize what a big deal it would be for this woman of color to win. And I could see that happening. I really could. But earlier I was talking about Society of the Snow and versus All Quiet on Western Front, and I was like, do you really expect this one movie to repeat the exact same narrative from last year? That never happens. I feel like I have to follow through. Because if anything, it's never the exact same scenario that was happened. It's never the exact same scenario repeating 2 years in a row. If anything, it's the opposite. And I do think it's going to be really, really close between the two of them. Maybe Carey Mulligan can pull a surprise and come up from behind if Stone and Gladstone are so close together. But this is a close race. I'm going to have Stone ahead right now only by a hair. I think they're both so fantastic, and it's going to be really, really hard, even just for me personally, to decide which performance I like better. So for the top 5, I think Mulligan's in, I think Robbie's in, and for right now, I'll go Sandra Hüller. I finally saw the movie, and I'm like, okay, I see what everyone else is talking about. It is a really spectacular performance. It is really showy. The thing is, Fantasia Barrino, when she failed to make Critics' Choice, and also when the movie failed to get the Golden Globe nomination for Comedy Musical, I was like, how strong is this movie? And also, how strong is the performance? Because I feel like everyone who sees the movie, their number one factor is Danielle Brooks, Danielle Brooks. But how many people are really talking about Fantasia Barrino? I feel like more people should be talking about that. Isn't that supposed to be the really juicy role for an actress to dig her teeth into? And yet, I mean, it's not like I'm hearing anything bad about that performance, but it just feels like no one's really talking about that performance that much, which is surprising. And Greta Lee, I could see that happening if Past Lives is really embraced, but I don't know how well it will be considering the strength of the competition. So for the moment, this top 5 is what makes the most sense to me. And Benning, Portman, or even Tiana Taylor are all possibilities, but I'm going to stick with this top 5 for now. Now, in the category of Best Director, I finally caved and put Christopher Nolan at number 1. I was hearing this for a long time, that this is Nolan's year, this is Nolan's year, and I was kind of doubting that because I felt like Best Picture and Best Director, and I didn't really think Oppenheimer was going to take Picture, and I was sort of looking at Lanthimos for Poor Things, and like, ooh, maybe that can happen, but the more time has gone on, the more I've seen people really, really hype up what Nolan did, and just how respected Nolan is as a director, the amount of stuff that he's done, like The Dark Knight and Inception, where he wasn't nominated for it. I just feel like, okay, I'll concede defeat on this one. I will predict Christopher Nolan to win Best Director, but I'm going to predict Barbie to win Picture. Yep, there it is. There's my mic drop. It does make a certain amount of sense that Barbenheimer would take the top 2 awards, but okay, I want to take some time to justify this explanation, because this is something that I was sort of feeling in the back of my head for a while, and I was sort of bringing it up in the past few prediction videos that I was this close to having Barbie at number 1, and then I took it down. This is something that I've thought about for a long time, and seeing Barbie get the most nominations at Globes and at Critics' Choice, a record-breaking 18 nominations when the previous record was 14, that is a big deal. And I was really thinking about the trends that we see with Best Picture winners since the preferential ballot. And one trend is that the Best Picture winner tends to be some sort of underdog. If you look at carefully, you can usually find some sort of David versus Goliath story, even though the definition of David or Goliath can change from year to year. And you might say, well, how is Barbie an underdog? It made $1 billion. Yes, but look at the genre. It's so against type for the Academy to award a movie like this, and so many people really aren't taking this seriously as a frontrunner. And look at what happened with Everything Everywhere last year. Even though I knew from an early stage that that was going to win, so many people were not taking that seriously because it's so against type for the Academy, but I could tell where the passion was. And Barbie, there clearly is passion, not just from the box office, but passion from just the world in general. This movie didn't make all that money because it's about a toy. It made all this money because it's of its criticism of the patriarchy and about men and women and how we all have to not be confined to gender roles and all that stuff that I can go into much more detail about later when I'm not really, really thirsty and have not had a drink and have been talking for a long time. Okay, so I get that this is a big deal. And I really don't want Barbie to get the most nominations of the day. Barbie cannot be the movie that has the most Oscar nominations, because once people start thinking of it as the frontrunner, then it's going to get left behind in the dust because there's backlash. There's been backlash about this movie since the very beginning, and even though the majority of the backlash does come from the far right and is fundamentally misunderstanding what should be a very easy movie to understand, there also are some legitimate criticisms that can be made about the film. And so but the other thing that makes me think that Barbie can win is heart. I think they want to go for a feel-good movie. They've shown this time and time again especially the past couple years with Coda and Everything Everywhere, they want to make them to vote for a movie that makes them feel all good inside. And that is certainly not Oppenheimer. That's why I never thought Oppenheimer for a moment. The way that Oppenheimer ends on such a nihilistic point of view, I just felt there was no way the Academy was ever going to embrace that in a big way. And so, and also Barbie, I just think about that montage where What Was I Made For is playing, and we just see all of these women going about their lives, and it's this really beautiful, poignant note for the film to end on. I don't know, and because here's the thing, I also thought about Poor Things. Having seen that movie now, I don't know if I see that winning either, because it's very, very weird, and I get that Everything Everywhere was also weird, but Everything Everywhere had this dynamic of this family drama that Oscar voters could latch onto, and even something like Birdman or Shape of Water, there's something for Oscar voters to get behind. Birdman is about what's happening to Hollywood in the state of movies, and Shape of Water is sort of this old school classical romance. And Poor Things, at the heart of it, is this woman forging her own identity, but it's buried behind a lot of sex scenes and behind a lot of very bizarre imagery. And I just don't know. It's possible, but it feels a little bit weird for the Academy to go there. Now, Barbie is also an out there film, but I think it wears its heart a little bit more on its sleeve and it ends in a more optimistic place. And so, yeah, I think Barbie's winning. Now, in terms of the nominations, I feel like the top 8, almost everyone should have this top 8. Maybe not in this exact order, but almost everyone should have it. And so 9 and 10 are tricky. I feel like we're definitely going to get one non-English language film in, but I'm not sure which one. Because having finally seen both Zone of Interest and Anatomy of a Fall, they're both great. Zone of Interest is very experimental. And while I think it's likely for a director nomination, and that means I am inclined to put it in a picture, there are definitely going to be people who see Zone of Interest and just can't get into it because it's so, like, again, it's experimental filmmaking. You can't just put anyone down in front of Zone of Interest and expect them to be on board with it. And Color Purple, I'm really, really curious about. I don't know how far that's going to go. The fact that it missed what should have been an easy nomination at the Golden Globes was shocking. But then Critics' Choice went for it. We'll have to see how well it does in the theaters and what the audience reaction is. But I can't imagine it's going to make a ton of money. People are suggesting it could be like Hidden Figures, but I don't know if the musicals have not been super successful lately, and Color Purple is not exactly the world's happiest story. So I just don't know. And Anatomy of a Fall, I'm still holding on to the can it really get nominated after France didn't submit it? I think it's very, very possible, more possible than I was saying before, but I don't know. May, December, and Air are also possibilities, and I want to believe that Spider-Verse could be one, but probably not. So that's it for me. I may end up making a video just breaking down some of the short lists and what's more or less likely to get nominated, but I definitely am going to plan on having a final Oscar predictions shortly before the nomination. So I don't know how much help it's really going to be because it's going to go up right before, but they're more of a record of so that I know looking back what I was thinking, and so I can use them for future reference about what can I improve on in regards to my predictions. So thank you very much for watching, and I will see you later. Bye.